Welcome to AIEA's videotape research project, talking with SIOs who've been in the field for a great deal of time, who can contribute information both for understanding now where international education is in the American landscape and understanding in the future for future researchers what the foundation they inherit from us is. To talk further today, we have invited Jenifer Cushman, who is the immediate past president of AIEA and has a very long career in international education and has taken a step that is not always typical in our field. She has just become recently the chancellor of Penn State Beaver. So she has moved more broadly into the most senior positions within higher education, working through the field of international ed, which I think it brings a unique perspective to the discussion that we will have today. Thank you for joining us very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I imagine you are enjoying this AIEA conference more than last year when you were actually the president.
I am. I have time to think. I took a walk today. So.
Oh my God, you got outside. That's wonderful. Well, I'm very happy to talk with you. I think that you have had a long career and you now are moving away from our field directly. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a very good time to ask you to look back as well as to look forward.
I welcome the opportunity.
Well, I'd like to start by talking a little bit about what your career path has been, mm-hmm. and how you got involved in international education and when, mm-hmm. and the steps you have taken to move yourself forward in our field.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start actually earlier, but it is relevant to my later career. So as a child growing up in West Virginia, I read a lot and a lot of literatures from other countries. And as somebody who wasn't traveling internationally and was in a rather parochial environment, it seemed to me that there was this other world out there that I wanted to reach somehow. So when I went to college, I had originally planned to major in psychology and German, and I did. And as with many people, my junior year abroad in Germany transformed the way I looked at the world. And this was in the late 80s, so it was a time of great interest for Germany in general, and the world in particular. So when I decided to, on my graduate school path, I remember it was during that year abroad that I decided to move into German literature rather than psychology. And that really started me on the path towards international education. After I finished my PhD, I went into the Peace Corps, thinking that I needed to make a difference in the world, right? That's where we all are. And was lucky enough then at the end of that time to find a position as a tenure track faculty member in German at the University of Minnesota Morris. Now this was a time, 1998-99 is when I arrived at UMM, when the University of Minnesota system was undergoing a study abroad curriculum integration effort.
Right.
And I became engaged in that effort, and this whole other career path opened up to me. So when I did achieve tenure and promotion to associate professor, it was a time for reflection, and really knew that I had enjoyed committee work, which I felt much more had more concrete outcomes than teaching German verbs, and decided that the career of international education administration might be a good path for me. Mm-hmm. So at that point I moved to the College of Wooster, where I was the director of off-campus study for 2 years, and then...
and that's quite a change from a public institution.
It is, although University of Minnesota Morris is the public liberal arts college of the University of Minnesota system.
So there was similarity.
Yeah, and I had gone to a liberal arts college as an undergraduate, and Rhodes College in Memphis. And then my graduate work was at Ohio State, which was a
very
great
different
contrast. Right. And I felt strongly about the community that a small liberal arts college provides. Mm-hmm. And that's why I initially, and very much like the public liberal arts ideology, and that's where I find myself again, actually. But for the middle two portions of my career was at private liberal arts colleges. And the College of Wooster certainly felt like an elite institution and positioned itself in that way. Then I moved to Juniata College in central Pennsylvania, became the Dean of International Education, and I was there quite a while, and it was a really good fit for my background at that time, because it was more of an academic position, was a liaison with the faculty and with our international partners, oversaw international students study abroad and on-campus international efforts.
Right.
And it was at that point that I really became engaged in the national organizations, including AIEA. And I remember one of my very first AIEA conferences, Darla Deardorff, the CEO, said, this is exactly the organization for you. And I believed her, and I've enjoyed going to the conferences every year since, because it's a smaller group of people who are really asking the larger questions, which I enjoy. So while I was to extend the career beyond the senior international officer, while I was at Juniata, I've always been interested in the larger picture, and was able to spend a year as an American Council on Education fellow. And that experience really did give me the larger perspective on higher education. It's a wonderful higher ed leadership training opportunity where you spend a year, sometimes a semester, but a year is better, shadowing a president and or a provost at another institution. And you really see, as someone who had, my career had been in academic affairs, it was significant for me to be able to see the other aspects of a university and what it takes to keep that ship sailing.
Right.
And I became really interested in that larger picture. So as I returned to Juniata, and this was like 2011, 2012, began to think about a career change. And a few years later became campus dean at Ohio University Zanesville. And so as I was thinking about the broader situation of higher education in the country and institutions of higher ed, I wanted to get back to that public environment because I felt that it was serving the students who really need to be served. It was 2 years at Ohio University Zanesville, head of campus, and then the Penn State Beaver position opened up, and it was really, to me, the perfect position. I love the Pittsburgh area, but it was more that it was a public institution with a residence hall. And so it was that residential experience that I really missed at Ohio University Zanesville, because I think that
it was community.
It was complete. Yeah. So I had gone from a small private liberal arts residential institution to a commuter pre-professional public institution, and I felt that it was a good change for me for a number of reasons. But I think the residential component of a college really helps solidify a community of scholars, and I missed that aspect at Ohio University Zanesville. So I have it at Penn State Beaver, and because I'm new there, we're undertaking a strategic visioning process, of course, because that's what a new leader does.
When did you start there?
July, so
Okay.
it's just been 7 months or so. And one of the other reasons that I made the career change was because I felt I had done what I needed to do at Juniata. We achieved the Simon Award, NAFSA Paul Simon Award
Yes,
for comprehensive
Juniata is very
internationalization, and that had been built before I arrived. But just celebrating that aspect of Juniata was something that I was able to bring forward, and I kind of did what I wanted to do there.
Right.
And I felt that the SIO position. That I was at the end of that, but there wasn't much to move forward. So it was really that ACE Fellows year that enabled me to make that jump. That a lot of senior international officers have since said, "How did you do this?" Because it's not a natural path, but I think it's one that needs to happen more often. We need globally competent leaders in our universities, and I feel that now I'm able to advance the internationalization effort at a much different level with greater impact. So that's what I appreciate about where I am right now.
Right. Right. Why do you think that that Ohio and then Penn were responsive to somebody with your background?
So a number of things. I'll talk generally and then specifically. Generally, it really is the ACE Fellows Program, I think, that made me marketable, if that's the word you want to use. Both because when higher ed leaders see ACE Fellows experience on a resume, they say, oh, this person has learned every aspect of higher ed leadership.
Right.
And indeed it's true. I have learned every aspect of higher ed leadership. My first year at Ohio University Zanesville, I remember thinking there was no situation that arose that the ACE Fellows Program had not prepared me for.
That's remarkable.
It was remarkable. I thought so too. And then for me particularly, both Ohio University Zanesville and Penn State Beaver have a large population of international faculty. And I think their expertise in the international realm hadn't necessarily been exploited to the fullest in a way.
Right.
So what I'm doing now is I think about our population of students, which is not the population of students who are at University Park in Penn State. A lot of first-generation college students, lower income, from an economically depressed area. And what they need in terms of global learning is very different from what a student headed to University Park would need or even expect. So one of the first steps, I think, is simply interaction with people from other cultures. And we can do that so much more easily now in 2017 than we ever could before through technology. So I'm really advancing, did at Ohio University Zanesville and now at Penn State Beaver, the COIL model. State University of New York has developed the collaborative online international learning approach to global learning, and we're actually going to be piloting a COIL course next spring. And as I talk about the COIL course, I think it really encapsulates what our students need and the mission of a Commonwealth campus in enacting the land-grant mission of Penn State, right. Which is a really close relationship with the communities in which we are and which really looks at our students and in the hopes that they can succeed in their local environment when they graduate. So our pilot COIL course will be a chemistry course that will be partnered with a chemistry course in the University of Split in Croatia.
It's interesting to be doing a science.
And it's where we need to be, right? And it's interesting because, right, coming from German, and I think the natural fit for global learning used to be more in the humanities, social sciences as well, but natural sciences less so, although it was my University of Minnesota experience that led me to believe that every
right.
major could engage in international right. education, that we live in a world that is inherently connected right. to other countries, and we have to acknowledge that in whatever field we are. So this chemistry course, we will be, our students, and this is where COIL comes in, partnering students with students from around the world. Our domestic Penn State Beaver student will be partnered with a student from University of Split in Croatia, and together they will create a presentation, probably a narrated PowerPoint, something along those lines, discussing the use of chemistry in Beaver County, north of Pittsburgh, and the use of chemistry in industry in Split. Yeah. So it really gives them a feel for the nearness of the globe to themselves right. and their field of study right. and their eventual job. Right. Because our students, you know, regardless of what they believe, if they've never left the county, even to go to Pittsburgh, they will be working for companies that stretch around the globe, and they will be impacted by global forces that they need to understand.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right, and I think probably today, given our political climate and the discussion about globalization being harmful mm-hmm. among certain populations, that education is especially
absolutely
important.
My population of students, I think, again, I wanted to reach the students who really need to be reached. There's a lot of talk in our country about intelligentsia having left behind a large portion of the population, and I think the mission of higher education is not to do that, but to really reach, to create, you know, educated citizens of our democratic society, so that we can think about issues, and that no elite individual can have a greater say than somebody who comes from you know, lesser origins.
Right. Actually, you're addressing something very dear to my heart, because the reality is that with study abroad, for example, it's still only 3% of
right.
the population, right. and there are ways that make it more accessible to students who don't have as many funds, but it remains often a very costly yes. venture
and
as well.
Even the students who are of lesser income, who engage in study abroad through scholarships, still have to want to do it. And
right.
so how do we spark
how do you get them
that?
to want to do it? And how do you
yeah.
educate? To me, one of the biggest issues for international education, and I think you're addressing it, is how do you educate the 97% of the American student population who don't go abroad?
Exactly.
Or and at smaller, more rural institutions who may not encounter international students.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So the projects you're talking about as chancellor mm-hmm. are you're being able to infuse them with your experience in international education.
I feel very strongly about that, and I feel privileged that in my current position I can have a greater impact than I was
right.
able to before, and we can, as an institution, decide this is a direction we want to go, and this is important for our students, and we will do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's very exciting. And may I ask how you chose Split?
So that's interesting as well. The University of Pennsylvania has developed a new relationship with the University of Split, And you know, you can have all the great ideas in the world, but you need resources to implement them. And they put out a call for proposals for any unit of the university who had a good idea about partnership with
That's
sports.
great.
And so we received actually some funds from University of Pennsylvania, or sorry, Penn State University to implement this this practice. So.
Well, if I might take you back a little bit, I wonder if I could ask you to talk with the same insight about what you have seen change in international education and your career in that field. And then I'll come back to your chancellor role.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because in many ways my career mirrors the evolution of international education in the U.S. Starting as a faculty member in the foreign languages, who sort of naturally took my students abroad.
Yeah.
And sort of naturally anticipated that we would have students from international institutions coming to study with us. So just to study abroad transformed me when I was a student. I wanted to see that same light come on in my own students' brains. And so I was engaging in leading study abroad. And I think in the early days of international education, it was that. It was about mobility. It was about faculty members who had partners abroad, and they simply naturally took students. Now, as the field has become more professionalized, we've rather than just the faculty member taking the student abroad or bringing students to the institution, and of course there are many more liability issues and regulations. And post 9/11, I think there was an increased pressure for professionalization of the field with these acknowledgments in mind. And there became more, I would say, international education professionals. Mm-hmm. And certainly institutions like NAFSA and AIEA have helped advance that transformation in the field. So that now you see, in many cases, especially early on, faculty members who have made the transition to international education. But now, people who actually get a degree in international education, this degree exists now, and then come into the field without having had that faculty background.
Right. Although it's very interesting. Do you think people who are getting degrees in international education are emerging to SIO positions?
I'm not sure if they are now. I expect they will be.
Because these are people who are doing PhDs.
Yes.
Yes, right.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
not masters.
Graduate
I
school.
think there's a large population who have of younger people with masters.
Mm-hmm.
Working very effectively in the field in all
Yes.
kinds of positions, but the SIO is a different position.
Yes. The degree is new enough that I think many of these people, even with masters, are coming in and they have positions at the lower levels, but as they get older and are proficient in their field, I would anticipate there will be more of that of a pathway into the SIO position.
Right. So yes, I think it has changed radically in the ways that you've described, and we were talking in an earlier interview today about the range of new positions in the field that reflect those changes. Risk management professionals, for example.
Absolutely, that's an important one. And another thing I've noticed is that the title of the SIO has become increasingly higher in the organization. So it used to be the standard that it was a director position, and then you would see dean and associate provost positions, and now they're even vice presidents of international programs now.
Right,
so.
right. Well, in your work as an SIO, in diverse campuses, how were you able, are there things that you're especially proud of that you've been able to accomplish?
I'd say that in my work as an SIO, what I was most proud of at Juniata, because of my German faculty member background, this is what makes me so proud, is that this question, to get back to the living and learning communities, Juniata didn't have living and learning communities when I first arrived there, and I saw the need for language houses, at least language floors. For students of foreign languages, it's so important for them to be able to have access to the language outside of the classroom.
Right.
And it's part of my philosophy of higher ed, actually, that the classroom isn't a sealed environment. You've got to promote what's happening in the classroom outside of the classroom, and also bring the students out of the classroom and engage with their academic field in the so-called real world. So the whole time I was at Juniata, I was really working towards establishing what we eventually called the Global Village, which is not only language floors, but also a space for international students and domestic students to come together.
Right.
So kind of a combination of the international house concept and the language houses concept. And it's thriving at Juniata now, so I'm really happy that I was able to facilitate that coming about.
And what about working with faculty at different institutions? Because that can often be instrumental in actually promoting internationalization on a campus.
Absolutely.
Is that something you've engaged in?
Absolutely. You know, coming from the faculty, I have a certain affinity for other faculty members, and I think too many administrators forget that they have this group of experts, you know, to call on for any initiative, and energetic professionals and experts who can see as critical thinkers the flaws in a proposal, and who can work through those and come up with a better product. So that's always been my perspective, and I really welcome faculty input. And at Juniata in particular, the international effort was always the faculty effort, and I think I was a good fit for that campus for that reason, that I really enjoyed working across the campus collaboratively with faculty and also with other units on campus to have everybody feel that internationalization was everybody's effort.
Right. And then as you bring all of this back to chancellorships, and especially chancellorships in public institutions, what kind of goals do you have for internationalization in those kinds of institutions, and what kind of challenges or resistance do you find there's resistance to those goals?
So the larger goals are reflected, I think, in 3 areas of the strategic visioning process that we're engaging in, and they also mirror the 3 areas of Penn State's broader campaign, because I think it's important when you're doing strategic planning to also assume that you're going to be raising resources for your efforts. So we have the Open Doors, Impact the World, and Transformative Academic Experiences. And for Open Doors, how do we, as an institution, enact our land-grant mission and go out into the community and make a difference in our communities? So one example that we're implementing in through our strategic visioning process is coming up with a campus master plan that really invites people in. How do we create welcoming academic spaces, and how do we bring people into our campus? So that's the Open Doors. And the Impact the World, that's the one where we then go back out into the community. And one of the initiatives that we're going to be engaging in is working with other leaders of Beaver County to create a kind of innovation hub. So it's a combination, and we don't quite know what it's going to look like, but it could include business acceleration, makerspace, after-school programming, community kitchen, job training. So something that really has an impact on the economic development of the community in which we are. And I really firmly see higher ed, one of the missions being in the cultural and economic development of the communities in which we are. Through that, partially, we're joining with the other institutions of higher ed in Beaver County, the community college and the private liberal arts college, to create a cultural series and a series of speakers who have different views on the same problem, who can engage in and model civil discourse for the members of our society. So the final one, the transformative academic experiences, that really gets at the heart of what we do as higher ed. So, you know, we can go out into the community, we can bring people into our campus, but when our students are there, what are we doing for them that can help transform them and help them to succeed in the 21st century? So we are thinking about, when we think about transformative academic experiences, we're using the AAC&U's high impact practices as a model. And of course, you know, how do we get students engaged in their studies? And the AAC&U has had studies that show that these high impact practices have an even greater impact on students who come from lesser resource backgrounds, such as our students. So certainly internships, service learning, global and diversity training. So this is where the internationalization, global learning comes in.
Right.
And it's the COIL moment that we're kind of pushing up through this process. That also includes familiarization with technology, which is a key 21st century skill.
Right.
So it combines a number of these 21st century skills that we need to.
And it's workforce related too.
And it's workforce related. I think that's our particular spin on it. That
Right.
That's particular to our campus, or that is, I'd say, particular to regional campuses of the state system.
Right, and that must be very important for both for the community and for gaining support within the community.
Absolutely, yeah, right. As we seek resources, we'll have potential donors who see the value in it,
Right.
I think. Yeah.
So you are beginning and excited, and understandably so, and doing some wonderful projects. It's also a difficult time in our country, and
Yes.
people are concerned about the future of international education and many other things. What about you in your chancellor role, and looking at it through the lens of international experience? What do you see the challenges going forward?
I'm fortunate that Penn State has fairly clearly articulated the values of Penn State University, and the cheer "We Are," with the answer Penn State, goes back to this is the legend, the Cotton Bowl, in which Penn State was going to play, but were told they couldn't bring their African American players with them, and they said, "No, we are Penn State. We'll bring the whole football team." So that cry for me, I think, illustrates the Penn State value on a new effort that our president is starting called All In, where all of our students are included in what happens at the university, and no matter where they're from or what they look like. And he's sticking very closely to that. The challenge is, I would say, it's a state institution, and we have to be cognizant of the wishes of the lawmakers and of the people, because we serve the people. So we have to find a balance there somewhere of asserting the values of a liberal education, of an inclusive education, and making sure that we're also in touch with our people.
Right.
And
Right.
I think the Commonwealth campuses are really where that happens.
Mm-hmm. So in the field of international education itself, with the experience that you've had over these years, how do you see the future for international education? Do you see changes in how its function and structure perform? Do you see growth in mobility or utilization of technology, etc.?
I think I'll respond about the future of higher education in general, and
Please.
it applies to international education.
Yeah.
And this, again, this goes back to my childhood in West Virginia, and sort of longing for the far-off lands, and I think that's not unusual. I think many of my students at Penn State Beaver don't conceive of themselves as being abroad, but they kind of like the idea of it.
Yeah.
So if we can, as international educators, reach those students who may not always politically align with where we are, but have that sort of human center of wanting to understand other people and visit other countries, then I think that's where we've got to head.
Right.
And in higher education in general, we simply have to become closer to our people again. We have to relate what we do in higher education more to what the students are going to be experiencing when they graduate.
Right.
We have to think about what do our students need to know and do in order to be able to be informed citizens of a democratic society.
Right.
In terms of the field of international education, I do see COIL as a model that is it is the future of international education.
And that is a digitally supported interaction.
Yeah, and I dream of like the Magic School Bus, where they would take students on this Magic School Bus to the moon, and with virtual reality, we're almost there. We can have our students have an immersive experience in another culture,
Yeah.
and that to me is exciting. We're not there yet, but that it sort of coils like a step on that journey.
And my final question is, just as past president of AIEA, and perhaps will this be your last AIEA meeting, or do you hope to be able to?
I think my focus has to change a bit. Certainly, working with presidents and chancellors is different from working with SIOs. But I don't anticipate never coming to AIEA again,
Right.
because it is for senior leaders, and senior leaders in higher ed ask the same questions, no matter
Yes.
what level they
Right.
are. So I would imagine I'll be at AIEA again.
And my question really was, what are your hopes for AIEA and its development?
I think AIEA is on a good path. I've seen it since I've been involved with AIEA becoming more open, particularly with the question of what is a senior international officer. In terms of the membership, you're not, in terms of different types of institutions, not every type of institution has somebody you can point to and say that's the senior international officer.
Right.
But we want to encourage anybody who is leading internationalization at their institutions, and I think that's the path that AI needs to continue to follow.
That's great. Well, that bodes very well then for the future of AIEA, and I'm sure that the Penn State system bodes well because you are there at Beaver.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming and talking with us
Enjoyed it.
today. Thank you.